A suspected perpetrator in the Rwandan genocide on trial. Pascal Simbikangwa, who headed Rwanda's intelligence agency in 1994, is accused of complicity in genocide and complicity in crimes against humanity. The trial is seen as a turning point in France, since it's long been accused of providing weapons and military training to Hutus before the genocide, in which some 800,000 people were killed, mostly Tutsis. Since France has been criticised for providing a safe haven for suspected genocide perpetrators. France 24's Yves Irvine and Sylvain Rousseau went to meet those closest to today's case.
France's genocide hunters. For the past 14 years, this couple has given every spare minute to reading, researching and trying to track down suspects involved in the Rwandan genocide.
Why did we take on the job? Simply because there were criminals here and the justice system wasn't doing anything about it. We're not professional investigators, but we decided we had to start somewhere, so we would just take it one case at a time. Look at that specific suspect. Where was he? What's being said about him? We need to go and check if that's true.
Defroza is Rwandan. She lost most of her family in the genocide.
Every single Tutsi family was affected. If you start to look inward and look at your own pain, you'll just end up stuck in a trance. It doesn't do anyone any good. Sometimes you have to put your own situation aside and look at the larger picture.
On April 6, 1994, Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana, a Hutu, was killed after his plane was shot down. Hutus who were in power accused the minority Tutsis of being behind the attack, although the case remains unresolved to this day. The genocide began. Within 100 days, over 800,000 people were killed, the vast majority of them Tutsi. As the violence swelled, a group of Tutsi rebels who had been exiled in Uganda fought their way back into Rwanda. Well armed, they fought to save their people and caused the Hutus to flee. To date, the Gautiers have pressed charges against 24 Rwandans who are currently living in France, and they're working on more.
All those files of witness statements that we've gathered. Every time we find a suspect in France, we then go to Rwanda to find witnesses.
It was the Gautiers who pressed charges against Pascal Simbikangwa back in 2009.
A lot of people say he distributed weapons and gave orders to kill Tutsis if they showed up at checkpoints. The proof we have is in witness accounts. There's relatively little in terms of written proof in Rwanda, but when you have many, many witnesses saying the same thing, you can conclude it's the truth.
Pascal Simbikangwa stands accused of complicity in genocide and complicity in crimes against humanity. He denies all charges, but for his lawyers, his case is a clear one.
On the facts that he stands accused of, he denies all charges, and we consider that the witnesses and evidence against him are not sufficient, and he cannot be condemned beyond a reasonable doubt.
A former soldier, Simbikangwa worked in the intelligence services and came from the same region as President Habyarimana, a connection many see as proof of guilt, but it's a shortcut his lawyers don't accept.
Pascal Simbikangwa was not close to the government. He had great admiration for President Habyarimana, who happened to come from the same region as he did. He was part of the presidential guard, but that doesn't make him close to power. He didn't make the decisions, absolutely not.
Simbikangwa's trial is France's first on the Rwandan genocide, and his defense team fears this could play against him. France has been accused of providing weapons and military training to the Hutus who were in power before the genocide and failing to protect Tutsis during it. Since the events, Paris has been criticised for stalling on bringing suspects to trial and not extraditing others, including the widow of Habyarimana. Patrick de Saint-Exupéry is a French journalist who was in Rwanda leading up to, during and after the genocide.
Definitely, in the shadow of this trial, other cases linger. There are documents, details that are questionable concerning the role of a certain number of people who were in power. These documents are bothersome. They've been on the table for the past 20 years, but they've been buying time to try and avoid answering sticky questions.
On gagne du temps pour justement ne pas avoir à y répondre.
20 years after the events, France's first trial gets underway on Tuesday, February 4th, with a verdict expected on March 14th.
And for more on this, I'm now joined from the US by Susan Thompson, an assistant professor of peace and conflict studies at Colgate University in the state of New York. Hello, and thank you very much for being with us. Now, UN tribunals and other courts have for a long time been trying suspected perpetrators of the genocide. Why has it taken France almost 20 years?
I think France has blocked any sort of culpability for Rwandan genocide perpetrators, whether accused or prosecuted. It is a safe haven in Europe for those who were close to the former regime.
And to what extent is France guilty of supporting the Rwandan regime that was responsible for the genocide?
I think the links between the former regime and the Mitterrand government are very clear. There is a broad relationship of Central African affairs with France. France gave arms, they gave soldiers, and they certainly helped the Hutu extremists flee into Congo and other neighboring countries in Central Africa.
Now, you worked there, you worked in Rwanda for a number of years. What's the perception of France's role in the genocide, and how could this case, this trial, change people's opinion of France?
I'm not sure it'll change people's opinion of France. On the ground, there is quite a bit of generalized hatred, particularly amongst Tutsi survivors for France. Also spurred on, I think, by the current Rwandan government. They've had on and off again diplomatic relations with France over genocide suspects, over France's failure to extradite genocide perpetrators, and over general support of France is what the government perceives to be its enemies.
And by putting Pascal Simbikangwa on trial, could France be trying to mend its relations with Rwanda?
I don't know if France is trying to mend its relations per se, but it could certainly mark a softening of relations.
And how many genocide suspects is it accused of sheltering? Might we see quite a few more cases, quite a few more trials like this one?
The numbers aren't certain, but the best guess that we have is between 50 and 100 genocide suspects are resident in France, including the wife of the former president.
Now, you mentioned the current President Paul Kagame. He's been given credit for rebuilding the country after the genocide. Do you think he deserves all the credit he's been getting?
I think he deserves some of the credit. There's no denying that Rwanda has made an incredible economic recovery. The question becomes, I think at this point, whether or not the gains of Kagame's regime are sustainable over time. The human rights abuses are excessive. They've worked hard to suppress them in Europe and in North America. And I think you're going to see a disaffected political opposition with a clear intent to take power in Rwanda, which will undo those economic gains.
Okay, Susan Thompson from Colgate University, thank you very much indeed for your time. That's it for Focus, and that's it from me for now. I'll be back in a few minutes with the headlines. We'll also be crossing live to Bangkok. Our correspondent there, Ismail Wolf, will be telling us about the opposition Democrat Party filing a legal challenge to Sunday's election. Stay tuned for that and plenty more.